Hey there guys, it's Albro1 here with a lesson for Beyond game developers on a chapter from the DM guide. Today I'll be going over chapter 3, Objects in the Tree. Let's jump right into it. First off, you can delete everything that we went over in the last tutorial because we're starting on something new. And I want to apologize in advance if my voice is a little stuffed up. Got some allergy problems. Anyways, now in case you didn't know, DM is an object-oriented programming language. In it there are 4 basic object types. Each one has its own special properties as well as properties that they all share. The basic objects are mob, M-O-B, object, O-B-J, turf, T-U-R-F, and area, A-R-E-A. There are other objects as well, but these 4 are the ones which are visible to the players. We call them atomic objects. The simplest difference between them is the order in which they appear on the map. Areas are drawn on the first or bottom layer. The icon of an area is often simply a solid background color. Turfs are drawn on top of areas. These usually represent some type of terrain like grass, roads, or walls. OBJs are drawn next and might stand for items such as swords or cookies. Mobs are drawn on top of everything else. They normally represent players or computer-controlled creatures. As a side note, the term mob stands for mobile object. It is also suggestive of monster, which is a common role they play. So let's jump into the properties these objects share. We've already seen that they each have a name and an icon. These are variables. There are also some procs, but the discussion of those takes place in Chapter 7. Now I'll give you a list of each variable and a description of its purpose. First is name. This is the name of the object, which by default is the same as the type or node name with any underscores replaced by spaces. Next is gender. The grammatical gender of the object may be set using this variable. The possible values are neuter. Let me just type these out for you. Neuter, male, female, and plural. The default is neuter. Remember that these must always be lowercase. What I mean when I say grammatical gender is that the inline macros that you can use in text like \his in chapter 1 use these to make the text. Next is desc, D-E-S-C, short for description. This is the description of the object. It often appears in the stat panels when the player examines the object. Controlling the content of these panels will be discussed in Chapter 7 as well. Next is suffix. This is some text displayed after the name of the object in the stat panels. For example, this could indicate the status of equipment items like weapon in hand or worn on body and so on. Next is text. This is a single character used to represent the object on a non-graphical map. If you've ever played Rogue or any of its derivatives, you will know what this means. Next is icon, one you're already familiar with. It's the icon file used to graphically represent the object. Next up is icon state. You were introduced to this already. Icon files may contain several alternate representations for an object. For example, a door could be open or closed. This variable is the name of the currently active state. Next is dir, D-I-R. This is the direction the object is facing. Some icons may be directional, meaning that they look different depending on which way the object is pointed. This is most often used for mobs, which change direction as they move around. Next is overlays. This is a list of icons or object types which appear on top of the object's main icon. Next is underlays. You might be able to guess that this is a list of icons or object types which appear underneath the object's main icon. Next is visibility. This variable can be 0 or 1 to indicate whether the object is visible. Next is luminosity. This is 0 to 6 to indicate how far the object emits light. Only areas are luminous by default, which has the effect of casting light on everything else in the area. Next is opacity. This is 0 or 1 depending on whether the object blocks light. An opaque object will block the view of objects behind it. Next up is density. This is 0 or 1 to indicate whether the object fills up the space it occupies. Only mobs are dense by default. Normally, no two dense objects may occupy the same position, but you will see how to circumvent that in Chapter 7. Next is contents. This is a list of all the objects directly inside of an object. The term most often used in the case of mobs is inventory. You will learn more about this and lists in general in Chapter 10. Next is verbs. This is a list of the verbs, that is, commands, associated with the object. These will be discussed in the next chapter. Next is type. This is the type path of the object. For example, it might be /turf or /turf/trap. You could look at this value in a procedure in order to find out what type of object you're dealing with. Now we get into location. The following location variables apply to all object types except areas, which never exist inside other objects. Lock, short for location. This indicates the container of an object. In other words, if object A contains object B, that means B's lock will be equal to A, and B will exist in A's contents list. Next is three variables, X, Y, and Z. These indicate the position of an object on the map. Valid coordinates start at x1, y1, and z1. The x and y coordinates represent east and west and north and south positioning respectively. The z coordinate specifies the map level. Those are all of the variables shared by atomic objects. The next ones are variables shared by all mobs. Starting with key. This is the login name of the player. By default, when a new mob is created for a player, the mob's name is set equal to this. Every key is unique, even when stripped of punctuation and ignoring case. That makes it a good way to keep track of people. Next is C key. This is the player's key in canonical form, which means stripped of punctuation and converted to lowercase. This is useful when saving information about the player for future use. More will be said about doing that in Chapter 12. Next is client. This is the player's client object, if it has one. The client object will be described in Chapter 9. Next is sight. This value controls special visual powers of a mob, permitting sight of invisible or obscured objects. It can be one or more of these numerical constants added together. See invis, obviously short for see invisible. See mobs. See OBJs, see terse, and blind. Normally you use the bitwise OR operator, which is this straight line right there, to combine sight values. However, you can use a plain plus sign as long as you don't include the same value more than once. Next is group. This is a list of one's mob's friends. It serves the very practical purpose of avoiding traffic problems. When a friend tries to move past another, the two switch places. Otherwise, it can be rather annoying to continually bump into each other. Now we will talk about assigning variables. By assigning a few variables, you can create a wide variety of objects. This is done in the object definition like this. So follow along with me here. It's turf, enter tab floor, enter tab icon equals floor.dmi. Now do enter backspace and wall, enter tab icon equals wall.dmi, density equals 1, opacity equals 1, then hit enter and type secret underscore door, enter tab, name equals wall, density equals 0, then go back to the level where floor and wall are and do window, icon equals window.dmi, and density equals 1. This example defines 4 turfs: floor, wall, secret door, and window. One can walk and see across the floor, but not the wall. The secret door is just like the wall, except one can walk through it. To round out the set, the window is transparent but not traversable. Notice how we had to explicitly set the name of the secret door to wall to prevent the default secret door from taking effect. You would also need to do this if you wanted the name to contain a character that is not allowed in a node name. Now for constant values, there are three basic types of values: numbers, text strings, and resource values. These are called constant values. Numerical constants may be positive or negative, integer or floating point, and can make use of scientific notation. For example, 3.15E7 is the same as 3150000, and that's approximately the number of seconds in a year. The maximum possible value in a number in DM is 3.4E38. I'm not going to type that out because that's a very large number, but if you don't know scientific notation, that means this decimal place moves to the right 38 times. So it's going to have 38 or 37 zeros. The smallest number you can have is 1.4E-45. And just like the one above, that means the decimal point moves to the left 45 times. Alright, text constants are often simply called strings by programmers because they consist of a string of characters. They begin and end with a double quote. There are several special text macros that can be used inside the text. For example, a name is assumed to be a proper noun if it's capitalized. You can override that by using the \improper text macro. So object CPU, enter tab name equals \improper CPU. Like all text macros, \improper begins with a backslash. The space after it serves merely as a separator and is ignored. A complete description of this and other text macros will be given in Chapter 11. In this particular example, the purpose of using \improper is to modify how the name of the object is treated in output text. As an improper noun, it would produce sentences like "you insert the CPU," rather than "you insert CPU." You will see exactly how to construct sentences like that later. Now, resource files, such as icons or sounds, are specified inside single quotes. For instance, to access an icon file located at see myworld man.dmi, you would enter the value man.dmi. You can make use of subdirectories within your project to organize things as you wish. If you use a particular value in several places, you may want to define a macro for it rather than repeatedly entering the same value. This is also useful if you want to be able to easily change the value in the future. Rather than hunt for it in your code, you can simply change the definition. To easily identify them in code, it is standard practice to capitalize macros like so. So do $define space master key space double quote Albro1 double quote. The all-powerful super user, and then enter, do mob/dm, enter tab key equals master key. This example defines a special mob type for use by the owner of the master key. By defining master key at the beginning of the code, it is easy to notice and change at a later date, say if someone else takes over. When players log in, before creating a mob for them, a search is first made to find an existing mob or type of mob with the corresponding key. If one is found, that mob becomes the player's avatar. Otherwise, a new mob is created for the purpose and is assigned the player's key. Therefore, a player who logs out and comes back later would normally re-inhabit the same mob. Now let's put everything together. So erase everything you have here and do area/dark, enter tab, luminosity equals 0, enter backspace, obj/torch, enter tab, icon equals torch.dmi, and then luminosity equals 3. Enter backspace turf, enter tab floor, enter tab icon equals floor.dmi, enter backspace wall, enter tab icon equals wall.dmi, and density equals 1. And then go all the way back to the beginning and do mob/dm, enter tab, do key equals, I'm going to do Albro 1, you can do your key, and density equals 0. I can walk through walls. Make the necessary icons and a map. Spread the dark area out over a part of the map to see what effect it has when you walk around in it. If you change the name of DM's key to match your own, you should be able to walk through walls. If you play around with this code a bit, you will undoubtedly run into things you're not sure how to do yet. For example, what if you want the DM to be able to turn off his ability to walk through walls at will? How about a command to create a torch with the wave of a hand? Such actions require the stronger magic of verb procedures, which will be covered in the next video. That ends the 3rd chapter of the DM guide. I hope that you learned something from this chapter, and I will be releasing the next video that will start on chapter 4 very soon. Thank you for your time, and if you liked the video, please click like, and if you want to see more, please subscribe. You have a nice night.